Welcome to the Retro Video Store Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Retro Video Store Podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm your co-host, Dave.
Dave is here as my co-host. Our third person, Neil, he has got to do some family business, so he's out there not going to join us today, which is probably for the better, because I know he would have hated this movie. I think He did watch it, and he did tell Dave to make sure he told everybody how shitty this movie was. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll try to represent Neil and myself in this. See how I do.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So today, what was going to be the start of a theme month of Adult April got pushed back a week because I had spring break and got super busy, so we didn't record the third week of March. So we wound up doing the host last week, and that dipped into April. We were going to do a bunch of erotic thrillers in April, but I think it's kind of going to stop that for now because our theme months have not been great. So I think we're going to kind of vary it up with a bunch of different type of movies and not just hit a particular theme until we get into September and October and November, where we just do a shitload of horror movies. But we're just going to try to do a variety of different movies and maybe some newer movies a little bit to see if we can boost our listenership. We appreciate everybody who's listened and sticks with us, but it is, hasn't been, we're not really scorching the charts here. So let us know. We really appreciate your feedback. If you want to hit us up with suggestions, rvspodcast222@gmail.com, or send us a text through the Buzzsprout page, or hit us up on our socials on Instagram and Facebook. And and we'll reach your email on the air if you send us an email. So we appreciate you doing that. But today we're going to talk about a movie that I distinctly remember as a cable classic. And if you had HBO, definitely one of those classics where you would you have the cable box ready and you'd be watching it. But if your parents came in the room, you would flip it back to something else. So they didn't know that you were watching this movie. We're talking about Dressed to Kill from 1980, a notorious movie directed by Brian De Palma. And so far with our Brian De Palma movies, I think that a lot of us, except for me, do not enjoy his work. I enjoyed Carrie. I thought Carrie was really good. Yeah.
Check out.
But before we dive into that, let's do what we always do. Dave, what did you watch this week?
Well, I didn't. I had a really busy week at work, but what bled into was just pretty much riding it out and finishing out March Madness. Just tons of basketball, men's and women's basketball, and so I didn't watch any actual TV or movies this week.
So, Dave, I want to say I'm sorry about Duke.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a hard one last night, and I knew it at 6 minutes. I remember they had 6 minutes left. They were up by I don't know how many points, but I texted my buddy after it was like Houston made 2 back-to-back plays that were really good, and I texted my buddy and I said, I don't feel good about this.
Yeah, I was texting a friend too, and she was like, "Yeah, they're not doing very good."
Yeah,
and it was sad. They played very hard, but they could not score near the end of the game, and they could not inbound that ball to save their lives.
No, and I don't understand why they just didn't have the big 7'2" guy put his 9'8" wingspan like way up in the sky, and then they just toss the ball up in the air. And that's what I just kept thinking though. Like, why is he at the other end of or just throw it at the other end of the court? That'll at least eat up 5 seconds. Just toss it. Yeah. Frustrating. And I'm a diehard Duke fan. So
yeah,
it was
we all love Duke, and we've gone to the Maui Invitational to see them, and I thought this was going to be their year.
Yeah. I didn't do anything to jinx them. I was going to order new Duke crew neck sweatshirt, maybe some shorts, but I thought, no, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. And I felt like maybe just even the thought of celebrating early caused me to, I jinxed Duke, and so I take the blame.
Oh, Thanks, David. Jeez.
Yeah, you guys could hate me even more now.
I know this is not a sports podcast, so I'm sorry for digressing into sports, but yeah, we are Duke fans, and they really bit it. It was pretty sad. So,
yeah. Eric, what did you watch? I know you've been.
I haven't really watched much at all. This is not very good to report. I've watched bits and pieces of movies all week, but nothing, not like an entire movie. I started watching the Avengers today, their first Avengers movie from, the first Marvel Avengers movie. And it made me laugh thinking how far they went with it, where the first Avengers movie is, for a superhero movie, sort of grounded in reality. They do a lot of exposition to make things seem plausible. Like, oh, here's the Hulk, and here's Thor, and here's Loki, and stuff like that. But near the end, it's like, hey, there's Rocket Raccoon and Groot and all these different things that are very cosmic and that didn't fit the initial kind of like phasing in of all these superheroes and stuff like that. But eventually we'll start talking about some more Marvel movies. I know we've done Iron Man, and we'll probably do Iron Man 2 down the line, just to kind of, hit that cycle, which is hard to believe. It's almost 20 years ago when they first started.
Marvel really has gone to shit in the last 20 years.
Well, they haven't really hit with great ones. I saw Captain America, Brave New World. It wasn't terrible.
Yeah,
it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible.
Yeah, but they haven't had anything. And I'll be honest with you, I don't follow the superhero stuff. I've seen only one Avengers, and then maybe, I don't know if the Civil War is an Avenger movie, and then a couple sprinkled here. And of course, I watched Black Widow, but I don't even know who the guy that snaps his fingers and then they all turn to pixie dust or whatever. And wasn't that the last good one when Thanos snapped his fingers?
Well, there was the Infinity War, and then there was Endgame, and Spider-Man. Was it No Way Home? The one was really, really good. And after that, they've kind of fallen off a little bit with the whole multiverse saga and all this kind of stuff like that. But I think they're going to right themselves once the Fantastic Four comes out later this year. That looks pretty damn awesome. And but I'm kind of surprised that the Superman movie looks pretty good. With James Gunn is directing it, and looks good. Looks like a comic book. Doesn't look like the gritty Man of Steel that came out.
Is that Zack Snyder that did all that shit?
Snyder, yeah.
Aren't all his movies that kind of just shitty, gritty, all hyped up, and they don't ever live up to the hype? Like, I just feel like every time I watch this, it's like a Zack Snyder movie. I'm like, this is going to fucking suck.
I think that he has things he leans into and may not really be true to comic book movies. I don't know. I don't think he understood Superman very well.
Yeah, I watched the Justice League, but I didn't watch the Snyder cut, and
I've never watched that either. I've watched the movie that came out, and I'm not going to watch 4 hours of his version of it. So
no, I can't.
Maybe if I got really sick again, I was sitting in the couch and there was nothing else to do, maybe I would watch it, but it would have to be low on other choices to watch. So,
yeah.
All right, so let's get naughty with Dress to Kill from 1980. Internet Movie Database says a mysterious blonde woman kills one of the patients of a psychiatrist, then goes after the high-class hooker who witnessed the murder. Meh. Decent Internet Movie Database tagline. Yeah. Not great.
High-class hooker.
Directed by Brian De Palma. Written by Brian De Palma. And this is one of those movies that put De Palma really kind of in that kind of agitator role, that he started making these movies that were there to kind of piss people off. He did this movie, then he did Scarface, then he did Body Double. He was out there just trying to push buttons. And I watched, there's a really good A24 documentary that you can watch on Tubi about Brian De Palma. And he was one of those new Hollywood guys, the guys who went to film school, came out, and started making independent movies, and then gradually kind of was brought into the studio system, and then became kind of notorious for the sex and violence that were in his movies. Really good documentary. Even if you're not a great Brian De Palma fan, it's kind of fun they talk about that kind of new Hollywood Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola, that kind of era of guys who got started in the 60s and then really came into prominence in the 70s and 80s, changed film forever. It's just interesting guy. He was really anti-establishment, made some like anti-war, anti-kind of establishment movies. And then he made one of my favorite movies called Phantom of the Paradise in 1974, which is kind of like the Rocky Horror Picture Show before the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Came out in 1974. It's a lot of fun. Paul Williams score. It is just kind of a weird rock opera, kind of sort of like Phantom of the Opera, but also Faust and the Picture of Dorian Gray, kind of all all mixed together. It was pretty interesting. Fun movie. Then he made a movie called Obsession, a psychological thriller. And then he did Carrie in 1976, which we did an episode on. Carrie was kind of one of the greatest horror movies of the 70s, but all the things that Brian De Palma does is in that movie. Split shots of one person in the foreground and then another person in the background doing something, and using that camera, the split diopter camera, where you can see something going on behind the shoulder, over the shoulder of the person who's facing the camera. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Yeah, when the guy was especially, well, and we'll get to it, the scene with the bicycle.
In the there was a lot of crane shots and establishing shots and moving the camera around, and just lots of tension going on in Carrie. He made a movie called The Fury in 1978, which is also about people with telekinesis, and it was almost like Scanners before Scanners came out, where people were blowing people's heads up and stuff like that. It was pretty interesting. Then he did Dress to Kill, 1980, Blowout in 81, Scarface in 83, Body Double, and then he did a movie called Wise Guys, and then he did his biggest mainstream hit was The Untouchables. Then he kind of fell off for a little bit with Casualties of War and Bonfire of the Vanities, which is a huge and notorious flop.
Yeah.
And then
I didn't realize he did all this stuff. I mean, you really look at going past Bonfire of the Vanities, like he did Mission Impossible, the first one. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I think, I've seen Snake Eyes, but Brian De Palma and Nicolas Cage in the movie. I really I like him quite a bit. He is a stylist, probably more than he is a writer. Like Neil sent me a dialogue. It's like, you really must have liked your mother, after your mom just died and she's talking to him. There's some very flat dialogue, but that's not what you're here for. You're here for his homages to Hitchcock, his kind of moving camera and the eye that he has for certain things that he likes to do. So if you look at his filmmaking style, techniques, and trademarks, De Palma's films can fall into two categories: his thrillers, Sisters, Body Double, Obsession, Dress to Kill, Blowout, Raising Cain, and his mainly commercial movies, The Untouchables, Carlito Way, and Mission Impossible. Because of the subject matter and graphic violence, some of De Palma's films, such as Dress to Kill and Scarface and Body Double, are often at the center of controversy. Yeah, especially when Dress to Kill came out, it was very controversial, especially toward its treatment of the killer. And we'll talk about that as we get into talking about the movie a little bit more. Yeah, and in 1980, too, like that. When you're talking about De Palma and the style, this movie I felt like was a little ahead of its time. And then if you're like comparing that to kind of Giallo.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this movie, and De Palma says he's never really watched any Giallo movies, but this has all the landmarks of a Giallo movie. It's a movie mystery. It's got the black glove killer with a with a razor, the perspective of the killer in some shots, and it's very, very similar to an Italian Giallo movie in lots of ways. I watched a shitload of making of and commentary about about this movie. Quentin Tarantino loves Brian De Palma. If you look up, if you were just to go to YouTube and type in Quentin Tarantino Brian De Palma, there's probably like 3 hours of him talking about Brian De Palma and how influential Brian De Palma is, and how much he enjoyed him, and how he was one of his heroes of making movies. So this movie was released on July 20th, 1980, with a budget of $6 million and made $31 million at the box office. So a decent hit, especially at that time. I remember being aware of this movie very young because there was lots of advertisements for it. So this movie came out when I was 7. So I obviously did not see this movie when it came out because I was super young. But as Neil's not here to comment, I had HBO as a youngster, and this and Body Double were the two like super steamy Brian De Palma movies that they would show on HBO, and with copious nudity and sex and violence when you were like 14 years old. This was like right up my alley. Holy shit, Body Double's on. Oh my God, Dressed to Kill is on. So one of those movies that you would like watch in the living room and with one hand on the cable box and the other hand, who knows where, watching these movies. Michael Caine is Dr. Robert Elliott, a therapist. Angie Dickinson was it was very controversial for her to be in this movie because she was, she was 49 at the time when she shot the movie, which I guess was considered super old in Hollywood standards in 1980. 49 doesn't seem to be that old to me now, especially now that I'm 51. But that was a big deal. I even remember like in People magazine or even on the talk shows, they talked about how it was so bold that she did these naked scenes, and she is naked in the movie, but in the infamous shower scenes, it is a body double.
Yeah,
obviously in those scenes. And Nancy Allen plays Liz Blake, the prostitute who witnesses the killing, and she is a business savvy prostitute who's buying stocks and doing other things. Keith Gordon. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was going to say, and Nancy Allen's, the whole time she looked familiar, and I try to watch movies without going straight to Internet Movie Database to see who she was, but I couldn't figure it out. And yeah, it's RoboCop's.
Yeah, she was. RoboCop's partner.
There you go. I've contributed to the podcast. You're welcome.
Thanks, Neil. David. Keith Gordon plays Peter Miller, Kate's son, and he's like the computer savvy tech nerd from 1980, and he's helping with the investigation, his own independent investigation on the murder. And Keith Gordon played a teenager in a ton of movies. I remember him in this movie, of course, but he was also in Jaws 2, super young. I remember he had the mutton chop sideburns. He was in Dressed to Kill. He was in Christine. Is Arnie Cunningham in Christine, the guy who gets possessed by the spirit of the car, and he changes from nerd to a sullen teen. He was also in Back to School as Jason Mellon, Rodney Dangerfield's son. So he was in quite a few movies, and he's gone on to direct quite a few things. Even now, he's directing a lot of TV shows.
So let's go see what his latest achievement is. Let's see what he's done recently. It's
Keith Gordon.
Last thing Keith Gordon did was directed one episode of a TV show called Dispatches from Elsewhere. Never heard of it. 2020.
Mm-hmm. His last big acting movie was a movie called Delivering Milo in 2001. Interesting.
He did do an episode of Better Call Saul, though, so we got to give him props for that.
So going back to the cast, we've got Dennis Franz playing the hard-boiled cop even before NYPD Blue. He's the grizzled police detective who was going to bust Liz, but he turns out he was secretly helping her. So we go from there. All right, you want to split up the critical consensus? You read the first
I can
first
do that.
paragraph. I'll keep going.
Here we go. Dressed to Kill holds an 83% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 55 reviews, with an average rating of 6.7 out of 10. The consensus states, with arresting visuals and engrossingly lurid mystery, Dressed to Kill stylishly encapsulates writer-director Brian De Palma's signature strengths. On Metacritic, the film was scored 74 out of 100 based on 16 reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews.
Yeah. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the film 3 stars out of 4, stating the museum sequence is brilliant, adding Dressed to Kill is an exercise in style, not narrative. I would rather look and feel like a thriller that makes sense. But De Palma has so much fun with the conventions of the thriller that we forgive him and go along. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune also gave it 3 out of 4 stars, writing that there were scenes that are as exciting and stylish as any ever put on film. Unfortunately, a good chunk of the film is a whodunit, and its mystery is so easy to solve that we merely end up watching the film's visual pyrotechnics at a distance, never getting all that involved. Vincent Canby of the New York Times called the film witty, romantic, and very funny, which helps diffuse the effects of the graphically photographed violence. In addition, the film, in its own inside-out way, is peculiarly moral. His review added that the performers are excellent, especially Miss Dickinson. Variety declared, despite some major structural weaknesses, the cannily manipulated combination of mystery, gore, and kinky sex adds up to a slick commercial package that stands to draw some rich blood money. David Denby of the New York Magazine proclaimed the film the first great American movie of the 1980s.
Huh. Of course, Ebert would like this one. Yeah. All right, here we go. Sheila Benson of the Los Angeles Times wrote, the brilliance of Dressed to Kill is apparent within seconds of his opening gliding shot. It is a sustained work of terror, elegant, sensual, erotic, bloody, a directorial tour de force. Pauline Kael of The New Yorker stated to Palma that his timing is so great that when he wants you to feel something, he gets you every time. His thriller technique, constantly refined, has become insidious, jeweled. It's hardly possible to find a point at which you could tear yourself away from the picture. Gary Arnold of the Washington Post wrote, this elegant new murder thriller promises to revive the lagging summer box office and enhance De Palma's reputation as the most exciting and distinctive manipulator of the suspense since Alfred Hitchcock. There's good props there. In his movie guide, Leonard Maltin gave the film 3.5 stars out of 4, calling it a high-tension melodrama and stating De Palma works on viewers' emotions, not logic, and maintains a fever pitch from the start to finish. He has also praised Pino Donaggio's chilling music score.
Where's Neil when we need a Pinot Donaggio wine joke? Did you try the Pinot Donaggio? I'm sure he would say that. I'm sure he would say that.
Yeah.
John Simon of the National Review, after taking note of the 2-page advertisements full of superlatives in the New York Times, wrote, What Dressed to Kill dispenses liberally, however, is sophomoric, softcore pornography, vulgar manipulation of the emotions for mere sensation, salacious but inept dialogue that is a cross between comic strip Freudianism and sniggering double entendres, and a plot line so full of holes to be best a dotted line.
Wow. John Simon.
The National Review, though, that's the notoriously conservative magazine.
Yeah.
Just shots fired from John Simon of the National Review.
Yeah, you could tell that one's a little conservative. He's like, what do they call the boobs in Carrie, De Palma's Carrie? Dirty pillows. Yeah, put those dirty pillows away is what John Simon is saying. Let's talk about the legacy and controversy. The film led to controversy and protest upon its release. When the film was screened, Iowa City National Organization for Women and members of other feminist organizations picketed the film as it was shown on the University of Iowa campus, distributing leaflets against the film, condemning what they saw as a depiction of violence against women as entertainment. During the film's initial release, the activist group Women Against Violence in Pornography and media distributed a leaflet arguing that the distorted image of psychotic male transvestite makes all sexual minorities appear sick and dangerous. Numerous critics have since placed Dressed to Kill in a lineage of slasher movies that perpetuate the transphobic myth that trans people are mentally ill sexual predators. Dressed to Kill was featured in 2020 documentary Disclosure, Trans Lives on Screen. In 2020, a reappraisal of the film for The Guardian, the critic Scott Tobias referred to De Palma's understanding of trans issues as disconcertingly retrograde. There's no getting around the ugly association of gender transition with violence, other than to say that it feels thoroughly aestheticized. It was 1980.
Exactly, that's my point.
It was 1980. And of course, 2021 with COVID's going on, all folks have nothing to do but sit at home and it was 1980. All right, just relax.
In a 2016 interview, De Palma said, "I don't know what the transgender community would think of the film now. Obviously, I realize that it's not good for their image to be transgender, and it's also be psychotic murderer." Let me say that again. Obviously, I realize that it's not good for their image to be transgender and also be a psychopathic murderer. But I think that the perception passes with times. We're in a different time. He added that he was glad that the film had become a favorite of the gay community, which he attributed to its flamboyance. So to me, and this is one of the things we come across a lot when we review older movies, where they say, and this guy's reviewing it, like you said, in 2020, saying it's disconcertingly retrograde. Well, it wasn't retrograde in 1980. That's what was a common ideal. We didn't know as much as we know now, and we weren't as understanding. Certainly in 1980, and certainly in a lot of the towns and places that we grew up, that was considered deviant. Obviously, we know, and I know people who are trans, and they're great, wonderful people who are just trying to live a life like everybody else is. So it is kind of, I can understand that the only representation that you see on film is negative, just like they were out for a sleepaway camp and for what's another horror movie that was really kind of sent that way. Oh, Basic Instinct, which made that was not very positive for LGBTQ people, but once again, that was salacious back in the day. And then you've got to view the movie through the lens of the time it came out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just like watching Revenge of the Nerds or Bachelor Party or something. If you're just going to sit and watch a movie and scowl at how bad it's aged, then, just don't watch it. If you're going to give it a chance and kind of view it through the lens of when it came out and enjoy it for that movie, then I think that's okay. Like I said, we are more knowledgeable now and more understanding now, which is good. But like you said, 1980.
You can't
45 years ago.
Yeah, you can't, and that's what I was just about to say. When they did that review in 2020 saying all that stuff, you can't look at something 40 years old and say, well, that offends me. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to go on a limb here and say that whoever wrote that in 2020 is probably not that old. It's probably not 40 years old. You know what I mean? Or over 40. I just have this feeling. That's my take on that. You can't say it offends you. It was 40 years old.
But a lot of things, it comes down to choice. We all have the choice to watch movies or not to watch movies. If you're going to watch a movie that is going to outrageously offend you, then don't watch it. Like, I don't watch gross out horror movies that I know that are just going to make me sick. I'm not going to watch a Serbian film or Salo or something like that I know is just going to, or a Human Centipede or something like that I know is just out there to offend my sensibilities. But some people like that, and more power to them. So, but it's just not for me. I'm going to choose not to watch it. So anyway, RVS Podcast 222@gmail.com. Let us know if you agree or disagree. So yeah. Let's talk about the plot a little bit. I do like the way things are shot in the movie. And often it's almost exactly, this movie is like Psycho in you have a star that you think is the protagonist of the movie, and she gets killed about 40 minutes into the into the movie. Just like Janet Leigh in Psycho, Angie Dickinson is playing that role of the person who you think is going to be the protagonist, but she winds up dying. And then the movie all of a sudden flips to the investigation of this murder, kind of like Psycho does. This movie also starts a lot like Carrie, where there's a long, steamy shower scene,
Yeah.
and you don't know anything about the people that you're watching. You just know that there's a naked lady in the shower, and you see what is her husband maybe shaving and not paying attention to herself. Not paying attention to, he's shaving and not paying attention to her, and she's kind of having a fantasy or whatever. And then all of a sudden, there's another person in the shower with her, and you're like, how the fuck can this happen? How plausible is this? What's going on here? And it turns out that it's a dream, and she's kind of maybe having a weird fantasy while her husband pounds away at her in bed. And she's like, what the? And I kind of like the way it introduced you. Like, what is going on? Who are these people? What are we doing? What kind of movie am I watching? And that, I think that's what De Palma wants you to feel. He wants you to go, what kind of depraved movie are we watching? What are we getting ourselves into?
I got to tell you, my perspective of that was that I turn it on, you see the shower scene, you see the guy shaving, and I keep thinking, like, what the hell is going on here? And then that was when the first work phone call came in today. And so I hit mute, and then I'm on the phone, but I've got the subtitles on. And so then when the husband's on top of her, the subtitles are what I'm assuming was the radio in the background talking about the weather. Yeah, but I saw that, and I thought, is she talking about the weather right now? Why he was on top of her? And I'm like, got somebody on speakerphone writing stuff down for work, and I'm just like, what in the hell is going on right now? I should have rewound that, but that was just my perspective of it, was that they're having a conversation in the middle of in the throes of passion, talking about the weather.
So this interesting thing about this movie is that Brian De Palma's father was cheating on his mom, and his mom told him, I need you to follow your dad around. I need you to follow your dad. So the part where the son is recording people coming in and out of the office and what's going on, that's exactly what he was doing. His Brian De Palma, as a kid, as a teenager, was watching people coming in and out of his dad's doctor's office, and he caught a woman in his office, and then he stormed through the door, and then he found her hiding in the closet, and then that's how he found out that his dad was cheating on his mom, because she told him to look for it. So there is a little bit of like personal story weaved into this, a lot of some of the experiences. And then the scene that starts the movie where, after she is in the bedroom with her husband, she goes to the psychiatrist's office, and then we see Dr. Elliot, played by Michael Caine. And Michael Caine is awesome in whatever he's in.
Yeah,
he just is really good. I like him in whatever he's in this movie. And there's like subtle things that are going on where she is coming on to him. Well, first he's saying that his secretary is out of the office. So he's playing the role of a secretary at the same time he's playing the role of the doctor. So that's kind of a lead off that there's something going on. He's playing two parts. And then when she comes on to him and she says, don't you find me attractive? Do you want to have sex with me or whatever? And then he catches himself in the mirror real quick. That's another like dual thing that's going on in the movie with his character. So there's clues that are going on to what's going to happen. So she, before she goes to the doctor, she sees her nerdy son. He's working on some circuit board or something like that. So it establishes him as kind of a geek, a techno guy back in the 80s, as much as you could be during that time. the museum set piece is kind of just like an exercise in style, where she is walking around the museum, which her son was supposed to go with her to, go with her, but he cancels because he's been working all night on his homework or his science project. And the way this movie is shot, and this is some of the background work I did, is that it's not shot in full cinema ratio. It's kind of compressed. So it's almost not quite like 4:3 TV aspect ratio. It's like 1:8:5, something that's not as stretched out. So it's more in a kind of a square. So there's a lot of panning going on, and there's a lot of like long shots that are on, on dollies and stuff like that. So that one sequence, there is no dialogue for nearly 8 minutes or over 8 minutes. It's just a cat and mouse where she sees the guy in the museum, and then he sees her and she's trying to get his attention, and she loses her glove and blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff is going on. And she finally sees him outside waving her glove at him, and she gets in the cab, and they have a little cab action where she's overacting just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. And she's
right. I noticed that.
Because you don't even really know what's going on, but she's acting like she's in Pound Town, but it's not really going on.
Yeah,
to put it kindly. So
yeah.
a little overacting. And then she goes to
the cab too. Like that was like what was crazy. It was like how quick it happened in the back of the cab.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh yeah,
what a fantasy.
And who's going to bang in a dirty New York cab? Gross. Who knows what the hell's going on in there?
Yeah.
In 1980 cab too. This is when New York was really, really dirty. It's like, New York was like a freaking dystopia back then before it got all gentrified. So she goes with a guy who she doesn't even know to his apartment. They have sex, and he's still asleep in bed, and she's writing a note and thank you for the good night and stuff like that. And then she sees his STD results, that he's got syphilis and gonorrhea, and she's freaking out. So this is like the urban legend nightmare. Don't ever, this like the one reviewer said, it's got a little bit of a puritanical streak in it, for a movie that's supposedly so sexy and so, provocative. If you screw around, you're going to get an STD or get murdered. There's really, it's kind of plays by these kind of moralistic rules going on. She snoops around, and then she leaves her freaking wedding ring on top of his clock. So she goes back. And when she goes back, then you see the killer, and he slashes at her in the elevator. I really like the kind of the perspective of the razor coming towards the camera, and you don't have to be a fucking genius to see that's Michael Caine. It's really, that's Michael Caine. I mean, there's just really not
a lot of mystery there.
Not a lot of mystery at all. You're like,
then there was like that weird shot, like when the elevator door closed.
Uh-huh.
And like, how did she not? You know which shot I'm talking about? The angle was just, it was bizarre. That kind of followed him in. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. Just, it was really odd angle right before she got slashed.
Yeah. So Liz, the prostitute we have not really met yet, witnesses the murder. Her trick is runs away, and she's left in there, and she sees him, and she can kind of see the blonde woman in the black coat with the razor, and she almost gets slashed too, but he runs away. So now she's a witness to the murder. And this is where the mystery turns into a mystery after your supposed protagonist dies. I do like Bobby, the alter ego of Bobby is supposedly the deranged transsexual patient that is calling Dr. Elliot. And, it says, I stole your razor. And it's this kind of, a weird voice that he uses. And, that's where they tip their hand even more, because Dr. Elliot is watching a long video from a Donahue show about transsexuals. So, you're like, Donahue. Okay, well, obviously they're focusing on this for a reason. So that really tips your hand to go, okay, it's somebody, probably Dr. Elliot.
Yeah.
Did they make it too obvious for you?
Do you remember Donahue?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, you kind of knew it was Michael Caine too. I mean, just like the
Michael Caine.
they were tall. The person was tall, and especially, I mean, when it gets to the train scene, right? I think I just, yeah, it's just like, come on, you know who this is. When they got sprayed and then they walked out of the train scene, like that
Yeah.
person was tall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do remember Donahue. That was a staple of my childhood. Was um, that was always in the background.
Yeah, I don't think people, if you weren't a child of the 80s or in the 90s, you don't really understand how big Donahue was. That was the big topical talk show where he had like controversial guests and different things that were push the buttons of middle American housewives who watched it at home. I remember my grandma used to love Donahue, and she would change the channel though if it was something too outrageous for us to absorb. Oh no, let's change this one. It's like you're sick at home. I mean, you're sick from school, and your mom drops you off at your grandma's, and so you're there and you watch Scooby Doo. Then you eat breakfast maybe, and then you watch The Price is Right. And then have some 7-Up and some chicken noodle soup.
Yeah,
And then Donahue comes on.
7-Up, maybe eat some sherbet. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah, eat some sherbet.
A little bit of Robitussin, some Triamenic, something like that, Dimetap, something to knock the edge off. And your grandma's watching her stories, watching The Guiding Light and The Guiding Light and All My Children. And then Donahue comes on right around 3. And then the news and all that kind of stuff starts happening like in the afternoon, and your grandpa comes home. And
God, you bring back memories right here.
Yeah. And so that was your day when you're sick.
Yeah.
Watching those types of things.
Yeah. Gosh.
Lots of 7-Up or ginger ale.
Yeah, I can almost smell it right now, the room. Just how things, especially when Donahue would come on and then the news, you knew it was, that one of your parents was going to come pick you up.
Yeah. And your good time hanging out with your grandma's spoiling you is over.
Yeah, because regardless how sick you were, you still had to go do your chores.
Yep. Damn childhood. So, so at the police station, Dennis Franz's character, the hard-boiled police guy, Detective Marino is shaken down. Liz says he's going to throw in the jail because she's the most likely suspect. And then the son is there. And then you find out that his the father or the husband of Angie Dickinson's character is his stepdad. So Kate is married again. But Peter is he's tech savvy, so he uses like a little listening device to hear what's going on. Yeah. And then he decides that he's going to start investigating the murder on his own. And he's using his stopwatch to time how long it takes between people to get through the gate to the doctor's door. I don't know if it really pays off or not.
Yeah, that didn't make much sense why he was doing that. And then I thought it was kind of cool how he had the camera in the bike.
Yeah.
Like, put in that box facing the door. But the stopwatch thing was kind of, real investigative.
I think maybe he was setting the stopwatch for the camera's lens to open every 14 seconds or whatever, just to get who's coming from the door. Yeah. That's what I think. I don't know if that's correct.
Come on, Peter.
So this movie, we talked about Brian De Palma uses a lot of split frames where one character is facing the camera and there's always sorts of stuff going behind him. And the camera was a specialized camera which had a split diopter lens where you could focus on one thing and then focus on another. And they use that a lot in Carrie and in this movie. And in Carrie, there was a lot of split screens too, especially during the prom where Carrie's looking at one thing, destroying stuff, and then you see the other things happen to somebody else. So De Palma has a very specific way of doing things that he kind of shows through a lot of his movies.
It's a cool style, though. I mean, it works. I think it's kind of it's different, but I like it. I don't think it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. So Liz is trying to figure out what's going on her own, but there's another set piece where she's being stalked by the blonde woman. There's a little bit of a car chase thing going on, and then there's this thing seen on the subway where she's trying to get away from the person following her, and then she runs into some subway thugs who want to do her wrong, and the cops are ineffectual and stuff like that. So just when you think that the slasher is about to get her, Peter saves her with his homemade mace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and how
that
the
is like
killer got away. How the killer got away. That whole scene kind of made me laugh. I mean, it was right on the door, sprays the mace, and then the door opens, and then it just goes right by everybody and runs out.
and he's like,
Yeah.
and then he runs away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Peter and Liz decide to work together, and they want to get the address book or the date book from Dr. Elliot to see who may be being attended, who may be going to see him that could be the murderer. So they devise a plan where Liz is going to call the doctor to set up an appointment, and she's going to use her womanly wiles to seduce him. And I must say, Nancy Ellen, pretty hot.
Yep, looking good. 1980,
Yep,
Nancy Ellen.
looking good.
I was a fan. I'm a fan.
Yep. Yeah. I love the old school like lingerie garter belt thing that was going on there.
Yeah.
Yep. Good stuff. But what she doesn't know is anybody who turns on Dr. Elliot now is going to get killed by Bobby, his alter ego. Oh, there was one part where this part really doesn't make any sense to me, where Dr. Elliot goes to the mental hospital and talks to another doctor, and they talk about his patient. Does he know that he is already the patient? Are we supposed to believe that he's already the patient of this doctor? I don't know. It just it's not really really well done to the fact that are we supposed to know that he is the patient or not? I guess in retrospect, yes. Once Liz shows up and turns him on, and then she's in his office looking through his old address book and Rolodex and stuff like that, and he comes out in full Bobby regalia, and then you're wondering what the hell's going on, especially when another blonde woman is chasing Peter down or holding him back, and then she winds up shooting through the window and wounding Dr. Elliot, and then you see Michael Caine as Bobby crying after has been shot. And this is where the movie really kind of steals from Psycho, because there's two scenes of exposition by the other doctor that talks about Bobby's or Dr. Elliot's symptoms, just like at the end of Psycho when Norman Bates is in like the questioning room with his blanket on and stuff like that, and the doctor goes on a long exposition talking about how Norman and the mother are the one and the same. After the mom died, the Norman became the mom. And there was two people inside him, where the doctor gets to do this whole exposition thing. And then Peter and Liz are at lunch, and she goes through a very detailed synopsis of what a sex operation is. And people are getting freaked out because she's talking about it so graphically when they're talking about it at lunch. So that's totally steals from Psycho. But you think the movie's over, but then you get this super long dream sequence of it's at the insane asylum and everything's lit in a very kind of like nightmarish way. There's these like industrial lights set around everything so the lighting doesn't look real, and it's very gauzy and dark, and these mental patients are walking around aimlessly. And then you see Dr. Elliot on a really tiny hospital bed, and he's kind of halfway out, and the nurse, very sexily dressed nurse, is there to try to put him back on the bed, and then he strangles her. And then while he's strangling her, all the insane people are above watching him in like a kind of like a almost like a surgery,
Yep.
setup where they're looking down on him, and he lovingly takes off her stockings and shoes, and apparently then they fit him perfectly. Fit him just perfectly. And then you see the scene where Liz is taking a shower, and then Bobby comes in and slits her throat really graphically. And this is the same, going to the Carrie well twice, where the person wakes up from a dream and they're screaming, freaking out. And then somebody has to calm them down. That's exactly the same thing that happens in Carrie, where it's a dream sequence. But I remember that very distinctly as a kid seeing that part. I know we was seeing that before I was allowed to see it, like maybe 10 or 11, and it was on HBO or something like that, and that being freaked out by that whole scene. I go, what the hell's going on in this movie? You know? And not understanding really what was up with this movie. And watching it now, I liked it quite a bit, but I can understand why people don't. You know, because it's not really a whodunit in a traditional sense, because you already know who done it if you just have eyes. And it's just an excuse for De Palma to have these three kind of set pieces that hold the movie together. You know, you have the shower, well, four, I would say: the shower sequence, the museum sequence, the subway, and then the dream sequence at the end of the movie. And everything else is just kind of
everything
window
else
dressing.
Yeah. Yep. Which I was talking to a buddy about, like a photography project, and talking about like doing a photo essay, and he was talking about wanting to do a theme, and I kept going back to like almost like what you said there, a set piece would be building around the idea of that cool set piece. And I didn't even realize it until you just mentioned that. But those are the four things that stuck out in my mind watching this movie were those scenes.
Yeah, I felt like he had the vision for these different scenes. And obviously when he shoots a scene, he's very, very talented at blocking and setting it up and moving around, and the camera looks great and stuff like that. It's just maybe the other things that tie it together aren't so great, like his dialogue, the plot, whether it really makes sense or not. And I don't even know if he really wants you to think it makes sense or not. He just wants to push buttons. And I don't know if you've seen Body Double. It's another Brian De Palma movie where it's all about voyeurism, where the guy is a failed actor and he is staying at house sitting for a friend, and he's watching through a telescope the sexy lady who dances every night. She gets naked and stuff like that until one day she gets murdered in front of him on looking through the telescope. And then he tries to solve her murder, but it turns out he's been set up the entire time. And it doesn't make any sense at all either, but it's all about acting, claustrophobia, Hollywood, and just sex and violence. So it doesn't really have, the mystery isn't that compelling, but it's just that he wants to kind of do like an FU. I want to push buttons and have a lot of nakedness and murder in this movie. And I want to make it even more naked and more murdery than than Dressed to Kill. Which it is. I mean, I remember watching Body Double a lot as a youngin', going, "Oh yeah, this movie's pretty dirty. Let's watch this." The erotic. Well, that's what we're going to stop talking mainly about Dressed to Kill, and let's talk about the erotic thriller from the '80s. I'm going to name off some movies for you and see if you have seen these. Fatal Attraction.
Glenn Close?
Glenn Close and Michael Douglas, where he cheats on his wife, and then she gets a super stalkery, and it's it was a very, very popular movie in 1987. Blue Velvet, I don't really think is an erotic thriller. It's just a David Lynch movie.
Yeah.
David Lynch is his own. Yeah. David Lynch is his own genre.
Yeah.
And Body Heat from 1981. I remember that one. It was very sexy with William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, where she seduces this guy to kill her husband, and that was very steamy. American Gigolo, that was with Richard Gere, also 1980, directed by Paul Schrader, and he's a high-priced escort, and he gets accused of a murder which he didn't commit. Early Richard Gere. There was Body Double, which we talked about. I talked about a little bit. 9.5 Weeks, and that was just pure softcore smut back in the day. It was directed by Adrian Lyne, but it was also written by Zalman King, who was the purveyor of smut at the time, who did Red Shoe Diaries and all those kind of softcore movie shows that you watched as a youngin' on Showtime and the Movie Channel. Sea of Love with Al Pacino and Ellen Barkin. I have to admit, I have not seen that one.
No, never even heard of it.
Angel Heart is one that I remember seeing. That's a an Alan Parker movie where Mickey Rourke plays a guy who may have amnesia, and he's trying to solve this other person's murder, and it turns out it may have been him who sold his soul to the devil. And it's got Robert De Niro and Lisa Bonet, and it's very sweaty and gross in New Orleans. Very, very, it is a beautiful movie, really good cinematography, and Robert De Niro basically plays the devil in it. That's one worth checking out if you haven't seen it. The one that I have not seen, but I want to see is because there's so many think pieces about it, is a movie called Cruising, where Al Pacino plays an undercover cop who goes into the gay S&M subculture of New York City to catch a serial killer. And it is a wild movie from everything I've ever heard about it. And William Friedkin directed it, and him and Al Pacino fucking hated each other and did not get along at all during the making of the movie. And that was a movie I want to check out. Dressed to Kill's there. Black Widow's in there. Wild Orchid, that was definitely, I don't even think that was a thriller. That's just a softcore movie altogether.
I don't remember. I've only seen one on this list so far, and that was the first one.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
You needed to have cable when you were
all we did watching when I grew up was watching John Wayne movies.
Yeah, these were all, I don't want to tell you what I was doing when I'm watching these movies, but
I imagine.
Well, I mean, being a typical male, I will say that if there was a movie that had nudity in it when I was like from the ages of 13 to 51, I'm like, okay, let's see what's going on in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, dude, totally.
Yeah.
We just didn't have those opportunities.
But and it kind of makes me sad that it really isn't that in movies anymore. And there's really not much sex in the movies anymore. And my friend told me, she said, well, it's all in the TV shows. All the sex is in TV shows. And I guess that's true. All the graphic boning is in TV shows now.
Yeah.
I don't watch many TV shows, as we all know.
Yeah.
But that is Dressed to Kill. What did you think of it, Dave?
I liked it. And I'd actually never seen it before. It's my first time watching it, and I liked it. For the style.
That's good. I'm glad you liked it.
Well, just how it looked in the 80s.
He's going to have to give us his opinion when he comes back.
Yeah, I don't think this is quite Black Christmas for Neil, but I'm sure he has some things to say.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. So, well, next week we are going to kind of clean the slate from our plans, and we're going to do Final Destination 2.
Hell yeah.
Kick it old school with a horror movie and do Final Destination 2 for next week. So, but since we're kind of reevaluating the movies that we're doing, feel free to send us a email and we'll consider it. So, and also we're going to try something different. We're going to try to do a little bit of a video review of Dressed to Kill and put it up on our YouTube page and see how that goes. So you can see what David and I look like.
There we go.
Go from there. Yes. So we'll see how that goes. But thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. Look us up on Instagram and Facebook and send us an email. We appreciate you listening and sticking with us. Sorry about Monster March. That was a pretty bad month.
Hey, I liked it. I liked Monster March.
I like Monster March. I love kaiju movies. So
yeah,
we'll still throw some kaiju movies in there.
Just not our
I need if I can't talk about Godzilla, I may as well not even be talking at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our
thanks, listeners
everybody.
Just don't want to talk about Godzilla.
I know.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Retro Video Store Podcast.